This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Thursday, October the 2nd. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly, David Williams. He's produced the program. You will be speaking with David when you pick up the phone to give us a shout in the queue on the air. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So I guess the Toronto Blue Jays will have to wait one more day to see who they face in the Division Series Championship. So the Yankees tied it up with the Red Sox last night in their best of three. I don't even know. As a Jays fan, I'm not even sure who I prefer to face between Boston with their fantastic bullpen or the Yankees with their terrible defense. Really don't know. Anyway, just a couple of interesting pitching numbers. This year, for the first time in 2 decades, there will be 0 no-hitters in the majors. It's the 6th time since divisional play began in 1969. No-hitter joining 2005, 92, 82, 74, and 69. And I love dropping a few stats when we talk about some of the legends of the game. Sandy Koufax. Sandy Koufax from 1963 to 1966. He went 97-27 with a 1.86 ERA. Struck out 1,228 batters in 1,192 innings. 89 complete games, 31 shutouts, included 4 no-hitters. The last no-hitter was a perfect game. And we don't see guys even go 9 innings anymore. All right, so municipal election day today, right around the province, except for the city of St. John's. It's predictable when we get some emails saying things like, tired of hearing from the politicians and the candidates. I get it. I do. As someone who sits in this chair, I understand. On the municipal front, though, it really feels like an important part of the show to give municipal candidates a crack at reaching out to the voters. I mean, they don't have the money like we talk about in provincial politics or federal politics, so we won't hear from any municipal candidates today outside of the city of St. John's. And please do get out and vote if you're so inclined. Also been told and asked, I suppose, to keep it on the front burner, the rebuild out in Conception Bay North in particular. I mean, we've all seen the visuals, the scarred black forest. Whether we talk about replanting and rebuilding, there's still so much worry out there. I hear from some of these families a lot. They're talking about what happens when emergency relief funding runs out for accommodations or what have you. Where are the federal government and the disaster relief funding money that we were told is coming to pass? We've hit the threshold that makes us eligible for that type of funding. So, yes, happy to keep that out there because I can only imagine what it must feel like to know that your home and everything therein and all the memories that were created there is gone and gone forever. So we can absolutely talk about the wildfire issues from top to bottom. All right. Some pretty discouraging numbers coming out. 2 organizations, the Jimmy Pratt Foundation and Choices for Youth, they teamed up to conduct a study looking at the number of children in this province living in poverty. Oh boy. 25% of children under the age of 6 in the province live in poverty, the highest recorded in Canada. That's 4 points higher than the 21% reported last year. Racialized children experience poverty at 31%. That's double the national average. So people point to housing, food insecurity. There may be some hope on the horizon when you talk about the reintroduction of an actual poverty reduction strategy, which we once had, which was the envy of the country, and it just went by the wayside. Then you talk about, and this is a crying shame when you think about it, expanding school lunch services. To know that so many children rely on the grab-and-go Kids Eat Smart breakfast and or a hot school lunch for them to have a fighting chance of having a meal throughout the course of the day is unbelievable when you think about it out loud. But those child poverty numbers, absolutely heartbreaking, unbelievable. Then I'm going to go back to a story from a couple of years ago because I think we can all agree that social assistance, income support, is broken. It doesn't work for a variety of reasons. Whether we talk about the amount of money, and yes, not to be mean-spirited, but who is on income support? I think that's a fair question to be asked. And then it was the hope to try to get people from relying on income support into the workforce. And so the province launched a pilot program back in 2023 called the Employment Stability Program. It looked like it was a very good idea. At the time, there was about 170 people participating in the pilot, began in January, and come November, 40 of them were no longer needing income support. I've called this good news, or at least a move in the right direction, just to be told, well, it's not really that good. Well, it's encouraging. So when the pilot looked like it had some success, the thought was to expand it around the province. So where are we? Exactly what's going on here? Can we have an updated numbers? How many people participated and how many people found themselves back into the workforce or entering the workforce for the first time, no longer needing income support? Here's how it worked. Participants begin a new job or continue working will get a government payment of $250 after 6 months, $500 after a year, and $1,000 after 2 years. So the incentive. Then they were talking about a new earnings exemption formula. We don't even have an exact percentage about what that looks like. Then it's just trying to get into the job force. They talk about a job start allowance from $125 jumped up to $250. So whether that be by particular clothing or steel-toe work boots or whatever the case may be. So if we've expanded it province-wide, an update on that front to measure whether or not it actually has a fighting chance to be successful. It'd be nice to hear from the province on that one. Okay. Then I saw Dan Meads here in the studio speak with Jerry Lynn Mackey this morning about a story that came out about the emergency women's shelters. So the crux of the matter here is that when government negotiates with the unionized employees working in the shelters, they got a bump in pay, but the funding was not increased for the operations at the shelters. So we've even mentioned Grace Sparks' house down in Marystown. Missed payroll a couple of times. So it's a very blunt question being asked by Dan. Not to try to put words in his mouth, but basically what he said is, are you, government, different parties, are you going to commit to increasing the funding commensurate with the increase in pay, or are you going to see beds close? It's all sad enough that the demand on emergency shelters is where it is, but that's a very fair question from Dan Meads. Are you going to increase the funding, or are you going to close the beds? And if you want to talk about it, let's go. All right. As you've heard me say, not going to dig into every campaign pledge made on the hustings, but a couple of ones of note. The stories we've heard about couples entering into long-term care with different level of care needs and consequently being separated. There's one story that I recall that's kind of haunting. It was either the man or woman, I can't remember who, but it was one of them was in the early stages of dementia. And when their partner, who they've been together with for over 60 years, was moved to another facility, the person said, did they leave me? I mean, can you imagine being part of a family where mom or dad have different levels of need and have been separated after decades together? So Jim Dinn and the NDP yesterday pledging to bring forward legislation to keep couples together. Now, it's not going to be fundamentally simple. I mean, they're doing it in Nova Scotia. It will all be dependent on whether or not a bed opens up. But if we're going to build more long-term care into the future, add that to the conversation about aging in place, can we not build with this in mind? It might not see people and couples be able to remain very close to their own community, but together at a long-term care facility is infinitely better than being separated. So there are some details that need to be worked out there, but that sounds like something that makes sense to me. In addition to that, it'd be also nice to hear from the leaders in particular about the status of recommendations that should be implemented as put forward by the Auditor General, Denise Hanrahan, regarding personal care homes. When it came out, it was outrageous. I mean, we're talking about different levels of abuse, whether it be verbal, sexual, physical abuse. Then we talk about the inappropriate administration of medicine, talk about feces on the wall. Personal care home operation standards have not been updated since 2007. And in the inappropriate or incorrect administration of medicine, one person died. So then we take it a step further about compliance issues. To be recognized, to be publicly disclosed, and a public checklist as to when, how, and at what cost compliance issues were rectified. Because they can go from the fairly innocent, like a loose door handle, to all the way up to inappropriate administration of medicine. So where are we? This impacts at least 6,500 families in the province. So it'd be nice to hear something on that front. And then an interesting story, and I'm really pleased to know that the Crown prosecutors are speaking out, and that comes from Mr. Sean Patton. He's the president of the Newfoundland Labrador Crown Attorneys Association. This one is hard to understand. So we've heard the parties talking about hiring more police officers, both with the RNC and the RCMP. Different numbers from the different parties, but hire more police. Okay. Then it's the concept of we need to hire more Crown attorneys. Now, Premier Hogan doesn't seem to think that apparently that's a requirement, but more police inevitably is going to lead to more charges, which leads to more people in the system. So is that not an important conversation? We have heard from the Liberals that the plan was to hire 18 more or additional Crown prosecutors over the course of 3 years. So 6 per year. Apparently there's been 5 hired since, but 4 hired since, but at the exact same time, there's been 5 that have left the Crown Prosecutor's Office, no longer Crown attorneys. So on top of that, there's been an addition of approximately 700 more criminal files just in the Eastern District. So without question, more police, very likely more charges, more people in the system, a heavier caseload for Crown prosecutors, but there's not a real rush to hire them. Now, I guess it's a double-edged sword, too, when we paint the picture of just how overwhelming the workload is and the traumatic type of cases that the Crown is taking on. It doesn't paint the picture where I think a whole lot of attorneys are going to want to take the job, but we need them, and we need them badly. So more police, adherence to public safety, and Mr. Patton's not saying that cases are sliding or going by the wayside or being incorrectly handled because of workload, but it can't be easy. So with the concerns of public safety, Mr. Patton is 100% correct here. You need more Crown prosecutors if we're going to hire more police officers. And then, of course, talk about the root of crime. Of course, some of the obvious contributing factors to the amount of crime that we see, and most of it is within the criminal element themselves as opposed to random acts of violence, but it's poverty. It's addictions. It's some mental health concerns. And not to say that every poor person, everyone with an addiction, everyone with a mental illness is going to commit a crime, but these are obviously contributing factors. We've heard from the sheriff's officers at the different courts that some 80% of people coming through are dealing with mental illness and or an addiction, and very likely living in poverty. So where's the attention to these very specific concerns? You know, expanding rehab, expanding detox, ensuring that every bed for every person that wants the help is given the help. Yes, it can be, once again, a revolving door. You know, the potential to relapse is very real, but the potential to relapse is heightened when there's a significant gap between detox and rehab. So let's hear from folks on that front. And a lot of this can indeed be dealt with if we do our level best in the education system, both from pre-K to 12, and yes, in the post-secondary world. There was a scheduled and hopeful leaders debate to be held by the NLTA, and only Jim Dinn committed to it. And the other two, I don't think the Liberals said they would do it, period. And Mr. Wakeman, they had a scheduling issue, as far as I can tell, as far as I'm told. We don't hear a whole lot from either of the parties on education, which is mind-boggling to me. I've said this countless times. The better we do in the school system, the better off we are on a variety of factors and fronts, whether that be poverty-related issues, whether it be health care, whether it be jobs and taxes, whether it be natural resources, exploration, production, creation of wealth, expansion of the GDP, expanding the tax base. You get it right in the schools, you probably do better on all these fronts. Okay, a couple more. All right, I'm not sick of talking about the Upper Churchill MOU because it's just too important. That said, you know, I know plenty of smart people, it's way smarter than me. And when we try to have conversations about the Upper Churchill Memorandum of Understanding, confusion reigns supreme. It really does. And the exaggerations and the omissions on either side of the coin are really not helping. Now joining the chorus of folks looking for an independent review is Newfoundland and Labrador Conservative Senator David Wells. A lot of his concern lies with granting Quebec 40% ownership of the Upper Churchill to develop Gull Island. I assume that a lot of the associated equity stake is also directly associated with the risk that Hydro-Quebec is taking. But he does go on to say that, let's see if I can get his exact quote. Anyway, it's saying that pretty much people are confused. That's 100% correct. As far as I can tell, sitting in this chair, there is a lot of confusion out there. And I get some people telling me that this is the prime issue in this election. Well, the people I speak to on this program, the people I speak to at the grocery store or my buddies, cost of living and healthcare and public safety seem to be a bit more tip of tongue, front of mind, than the Upper Churchill, which will have consequences in this province for 50, 60 years. So we can talk about, let me restart that. What would be helpful? I mean, we all know that the LeBlanc inquiry into Muskrat Falls had a very clear recommendation about independent review in any capital project in excess of $50 million. What's missing in some fronts and in some commentary is exactly what we're asking an independent body to do. Is it a clear and well-defined definition and explanation of risk? Is it about the potential for exit clauses, of which there are one in 2051, 2061, but that's way down the road. So can we or should we not include all the variables that may change the landscape of electricity demand and price? Price elasticity. What happens if there's an east-west energy corridor? What happens if the federal government gets involved with any direct investment, whether it be in the province of Quebec or at the Upper Churchill or at Gull, because that does change things. So it would be a really helpful exercise. Michael Wilson has been very helpful to me in sending along his analysis, and a lot of it is extremely complex, but it's important. So whoever out there is in vehement opposition to it, and fair enough, put forward as suggested terms of reference for said independent review. Exactly what we're asking someone to look at. Because I don't think it's unfair to say that simply saying to pick an outlet, the Royal Bank of Canada, TD, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, is this a good deal? Did we maximize the potential, financially speaking, for this province? I don't think there's an answer to that. But give us very specific questions where they can be addressed. And I don't think that's a whole lot to ask. In fact, to me, that sounds like step one in the exercise. But anyway, Mr. Wells is putting it out there. But is that the be-all and end-all for the voters here in the province? For me, it's very close to the very top of the list. But do people think about it when they go to the grocery store? And a lot of the pledges or promises being made do include monies we don't have yet, whether it be because of big tobacco or whether it be because of potential for monies on the average of $1 billion a year over the next 16, 17 years coming into the coffers to be spent on whatever. In addition to that, the promises that are being made about reduction in taxes, whether it be small business or for individuals, whatever the case may be, additional spending is not being coupled with exactly what that means for the potential and the need to borrow into the future. I know this is Debbie Downer kind of stuff, but to ignore the fact is going to be to our collective detriment. Debt is out of control. Deficit also. I mean, what are we posting? A $629 million deficit this year, which includes all the big tobacco money, at the exact same time borrowing $4.1 billion. We need to hear more on that front. And it's not about the futures fund and any rationale for putting money into a futures fund while we are actually servicing the debt to the tune of about $1.1 billion per year. So if you want to take it on, we can do it. Very last one on the federal front. And this is an important story that I think really does split what some people might consider splitting a hair. But if we're on the path this year to finally hit 2% of GDP to be spent on defense spending, so that's an additional almost $9 billion this year, we're on the committed pathway to 5% of GDP, which adds up to about $150 billion a year. Currently, 75 cents out of every dollar we spend on defense procurement is spent in the United States. So this article is about splitting the issue between defense procurement and defense production. Defense production at this moment in time in this country basically leans in on the shipbuilding. So we've got the National Shipbuilding Strategy, Arctic offshore patrol ships and new river-class destroyers. We're entering into a strategic defense and security partnership with the European Union called Rearm Europe. That's $1.25 trillion worth of spend. But how do we ensure that, not only the procurement strategy, but the defense production strategy to ensure that some of those $150 billion is spent here? And we have a bit more control and grasp of national defense based on spending money, creating jobs, and being a bit more in control of our strategy, as opposed to 75 cents of every single dollar to be spent in the United States. So I thought that was an interesting article. What do you think? We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. That can only happen if you're in the queue to talk about whatever's on your mind. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's begin this morning on line number 4. Craig, you're on the air.
Hello.
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 Hello. Good morning.
How are you today?
I'm not too bad. Thank you. How about you?
We're not bad. I hear your preamble there talking about the debt and whatnot, the problems in.
Yeah.
I'm just, yes, concerned and whatnot. I'm a working man like everyone else. See my money being wasted. But who do we owe the money to? We're borrowing this money. Who are we borrowing it off?
It's an excellent question. And the only reason I focus in on it so much, Craig, is because if we're spending over $1 billion a year just simply to service the debt, we're not chipping away at it, we're just servicing it. To be able to spend that money on other facets of life would be to all of our benefit. But your question is a really good one. basically, and I mean, it's hard to say basically when we're talking about billions of dollars, but basically, when the province issues a bond, it creates its own debt. Because that's what we do, right? We go to the bond market, which we've simply expanded to Europe in the recent past. So when we issue a bond, we have to be able to cover it because the investors take the bond, and so then we owe on it. Then also, like we owe the federal government, for example. Then we've got unfunded pension liabilities, which we have to borrow money for to cover it. So it's a pretty broad answer, but number one and primarily is the issuing of bonds. Then we borrow from the federal government, including at Muskrat Falls. Then we've got other financial institutions that we've borrowed money from, and that includes some of the big players, TD, Goldman Sachs, and the like. But those three areas are the basics of where we have found ourselves in this level of debt.
Right on. So what happens when, because it's going to happen, clear as mud, like when it can only go so far, and, they'll sparkle with millions of dollars as they're speaking these days in their election promises, which I think they're all making fools of themselves, is, where are they going to get the money? Where are they really going to get the money? Money that they're fantasizing and dreaming of, but, what happens when they don't got the money to pay these people?
Another good question.
What happens to us then as the independent provinces we hope to be?
The concept of going bankrupt is not really a distinct worry that I have, considering the fact that we are part of a confederation, and it's not in the country's best interest for any province to be insolvent. We have the highest per capita debt load in the country, around $68,000 per person. Second on that front is Ontario, I believe, and then Alberta has the lowest per capita. It's about $40,000. So the basics are we just have to borrow, which is becoming unsustainable. We still have a pretty solid credit rating in this province, it needs to be said, but to cover the servicing of debt, like this year, we're borrowing over $4 billion. And some of that is simply to service debt, in addition to cover all of the other expenditures. We have we don't really have a revenue side problem. We have a spending side problem here in this province. That's just my personal opinion. So, yeah, the basic question is, remember, when Dwight Ball was the premier, we were told at one point that the province wasn't going to be able to make payroll. We weren't going to be able to get any long-term loans, which turned out to not be necessarily 100% accurate. But the basics are, if we keep spending the way we do, then we just have to keep on borrowing, which just keeps on heaping onto the debt, which just keeps on increasing the amount of money per year that we have to service the debt with, which is just paying interest. It's not chipping away at it. So it becomes a perfect storm. So some of the monies that different parties are relying on is the hopes of a Bay du Nord, is the hopes of critical mineral expansion in Labrador, is the hopes of the Upper Churchill MOU and the revenues associated with it, all of which is very aspirational, but it's only an if these things come to pass. So it's an excellent question and excellent questions that you're asking this morning.
No, it's just something that, I wish I was braver and whatnot. I'd be into politics myself, but that's not going to happen now at this stage of the game. But I tell you, it's awful frustrating listening to these people. And, they all inherit the ship that they're trying to run. So they got to put up with what they got. And, let's make some plans that's actually going to work for the people. Our health care is a mess. We can't afford to eat. I can't afford to really go to work. I can't afford to stay home. It's ridiculous. It's just everything's gone ridiculous. And I wish these people with the power would really understand what the people of this province are going through and how they're crucifying my paycheck every week just for the sake of their whims, because I don't see nothing really done from my. They went and done a little bit of patchwork on Trans-Canada in Whitburn and St. John's a couple of weeks ago. They haven't done 2 kilometers. Out there this morning, it was raining hard on the highway. We had 2 rivers run half of that highway this morning. And it's just wrong. My God, it's just wrong. And I wish these people would really wake up and understand what the regular Joe is going through in this world and stop wasting money.
And Craig, that's where I think my mind is on what's important to people during this election. We could be told that it's the Upper Churchill, we could be told that it's healthcare, and all of those things are very, very real. But I think primarily, people, generally speaking, they vote with their pocketbooks, right? Cost of living issues specifically groceries, which I don't know if the provincial government has any real levers to pull regarding the price of groceries. Maybe, the concept of peppering the landscape with hydroponic greenhouses to help people not have to travel for even leafy greens or other things that could be produced close by where they live. But other than that, cost of living is going to really dominate the conversation as far as I can tell.
Oh, yes, it most certainly is you're not getting to save much money anymore. You can't save anything.
Yeah.
And like they'll talk about this church of all things, and I hope they're doing right, because, it seems like things are proceeding the way Quebec wants it to, not the way I don't think that we want it to. The way Quebec they dictated the piece of paper that they got. They can say what they want here in Newfoundland, but this is a Quebec agreement. And, I hope these guys are going to sign off on that. Don't be remembered like the mistake that was done 50 years ago, because your name is going to be in the history books for a long time. Whether you want it to be good or bad, they got the opportunity to make it good. And I wish things would be more upfront. I don't understand whole issues. I listen to your show and I listen to other people's views and whatnot. I don't know where these people are professional enough, being who they are, to make such economic decisions for our province. They are not the best of the best people. And they got to realize, get off their high horse, that they are not the best of the best people doing these kinds of deals. I hear a lot of good businessmen, and some for and some against, talking on your show. If I had to be on a one scale to the other, the guys is talking against it is outweighing the few that is speaking for it by far. So yeah, I hope that they're going to do it right.
Well, I think we all share that hope. Sometimes the supportive voices really don't want to put their neck in the noose. And insofar as if we have the best people running, look, there's plenty of good people in politics. We had good people representing us negotiating with Hydro-Quebec. But even, it's probably worth our while to break down cost of living a little more, because people lean in on groceries because we all eat. It doesn't matter who you're going to vote for. Everyone's got to go to the grocery store. But insurance premiums, the cost of fuel. Just imagine if the 8 cents that was taken off the provincial fuel tax was put back on. I mean, there's lots of things. Cell phone bills have come back to earth a little bit, but my insurance premiums are up. The cost to heat my home is up. The price of groceries are up. Cost of pharmaceuticals are up. So depends on who you are in your lot in life. Go into your pocketbook every day. Like I went to the grocery store yesterday, like I do most every day. It's just part of my routine. I came out of Sobeys yesterday with not very much in that bag, but I was $70 lighter. And not very much in that bag. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, that's right. When I used to see these white bags back a few years back, when they had the white shopping bags, they were $10 a bag first when the wife started work coming out of the store. Then they went to $20. Now they're, oh, geez, yes, you put $150 if you want to buy a bit of meat in a bag. And people can't do it. On my check every week, I'm seeing $600 almost gone out of my check. I make a little bit of money, but boy, they're not doing no good with it. That $600, I can make such a big difference in my life and probably someone else's life around me, my kids or whatever. And these people got everybody paying them, and they're not doing the right things with the money. They're just not. Go to the bank with this track record. And besides, the banks knows that they got all these people paying them, so I guess they'll always give them credit. It must be a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's different, right? I don't pretend to be able to speak for everybody's needs or wants, but everybody needs or wants something. And whether or not you're hearing what you need or want from the different parties, which is also part of campaign promises. This is not a critique of any individual politician, but putting your finger in your mouth to wet it, to see which way the wind is blowing, and then make a pledge on that front is really not that helpful. Long-term plans, big strategies, things we can measure against, just some of that stuff is missing. I think we're on the right track with 10-year plans in health and education. Not necessarily that every detail in both of those accords is 100% something that I would agree with, but it's a strategy. It's something. Yeah. We need to apply that to debt and deficit as well. We just do. We don't do it currently, but we certainly do need to, in my own personal opinion. Greg, I enjoyed the conversation. I'm glad you called.
Yes. Anyway, cheers, brother. You go and deal with some other people.
I'll do my best. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Bud.
Bye, Greg. And being asked via email, how come I didn't bring up the newly proposed pipeline from Alberta to the BC coast? Well, we can talk about it, but at this time, it's simply a taxpayer-funded proposed pipeline with no private sector investment to carry oil that isn't even produced, considering the fact that the twinning of the Trans Mountain pipeline is still not operating at full capacity. Some of that has to do with costs and what have you, tariffs and fees. But anyway, if you wanted to talk about the proposed pipeline, which is simply a taxpayer pipeline, we can do it. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to say good morning to the Mayor of Port aux Basques. That's Brian Button on his very last day in office. We'll see what Mr. Button has to say, and then we'll speak with you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the Mayor of Port aux Basques. That's Brian Button. Good morning, Mayor Button. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Very well. How about you?
Not too bad. It's a beautiful sunny day out here in Port aux Basques area, so can't be bad when it's sunny like that. But I guess finishing up, as you said there before we went to break, my last days as mayor. After today, I'll be finished up. We'll have a new mayor in the community, but there is one pressing issue I did want to talk about this morning before I did leave office.
Okay, what is it?
Well, Patty, to take it back a little while ago, over the last couple of years while we were in office, we had a bunch of homes that was in the community. The RCMP used to have a lot of their members lived into them. But we had a surplus of these homes that were here in the community, so they were going up and were going to be let go and probably sold off or used in other divisions, whether it be provincially or municipalities. The province at the time was the first persons that would have had the opportunity to get the homes, and then the municipalities were also involved. And we were trying at that time to see if we could get one of the homes that we wanted to use for healthcare purposes. One of the biggest problems we have in rural Newfoundland is, trying to bring healthcare professionals such as doctors and into the communities and having housing for them. We had worked with the local health authority here, and we were trying and looking at a plan where we could get these RCMP homes, or at least one of them, and to be able to, have if we were to have a doctor that was coming to the area, or some of our learners, some of the doctors that are actually going through the system and going to university, and we get a lot of those in the area, we would have a place for them to live. We had worked on that, and then we had started working with the federal government, because this is a federal government issue, and we started working with the local MP, and we started trying to get the homes. First, when we tried to get them, there was a price that was put on the homes, which was something that we as a municipality at the time could not afford. And we wanted to take any monies we were going to put into it, invest in the homes, and have the homes developed in a way where they were suitable for physicians and whoever to live in the community.
How many homes are we talking about, Mayor Button?
What's that?
How many of these homes are we talking about?
Well, there was at least 2 to 3 homes that they were looking at moving out, but we were really only interested in getting one. If we could get one, and whatever else would happen with the other homes, whether they got sold off to residents in the community or they got used elsewhere, that was fine. But if we could have gotten one, that is what we were looking for. Again, at the time when they put it out, it just wasn't affordable for us. But working with the former MP, and we had worked with MP Goody Hutchings at the time, and we had continued for a couple of years to work on something where we could hopefully be able to get the homes for $1 and then be able to take any monies we had, reinvest in the homes. It took quite a bit of work, and quite a bit of lobbying and a back and forth. And we were able, last year in December month, we were able to strike a deal. And we were able to strike a deal where we would be able to get one of these homes. At the time, they were going to disperse 2 of the homes to us, but later said that they would have to use one of the other homes for RCMP reasons again. So we were getting 1 home. The deal got struck. A contract got put together by the vendor, which was the federal government. The contract was then sent to us for review. We had our lawyers review the contract. In the contract, it stated that the home would be turned over to us for $1, and we would have to use the homes for at least 5 years for healthcare purposes before we were allowed to do anything else with the homes. which we agreed with that. We had our lawyers take a look at it, and I was able to sign it on behalf of the community and send back. At that time, as we know, the federal government had a shutdown in February and shut down the government at that time, and we were unable to get the deal finalized and pushed to the finish line. And then a federal election was called. And after the federal election and things started to get back, we started to inquire if we wanted to get this finished up. At least our council wanted to get it finished up before we left office and be able to have this deal done for the local health authority. Lo and behold, we get a call back, and it says that this deal is no longer going to be put on the table. And if we want the home was then valued then at $200,000, and the town would have to pay that. And we had until a Friday to do so. That kind of upset us. We had a deal done. The deal was done. The contract was sent to us by the vendor, because that's one of the things I had them say to me when I reached out was, well, the vendor didn't sign the contract. I said, but the vendor prepared the contract. The vendor prepared the contract, sent it out to us. We had our lawyers review it, and we signed it in good faith to have this deal done and to be used for healthcare purposes. Once I got that, I did reach out to the former MP, because I knew she was involved, and see if she could get the ear of, our local our minister responsible for Newfoundland and Labrador, MP Joanne Thompson, to try to see if we could get this deal figured out and get this straightened away as it was put in place beforehand. And it was all the information was sent, as far as I know, to Ms. Thompson. Haven't heard a word from the MP, hasn't reached out to me or the council to say, what was going on with the deal. I tried to wait right up until the last days. We were still trying to work this out yesterday. It didn't get done, or we hadn't heard from anybody. But this is a deal that was very important and is very important to the community when it comes to healthcare delivery. It was a deal that was worked on for a couple of years. And then to see it pooled, it only makes me believe one thing, Patty, and the only thing that I can narrow it down to, we had the deal done when the community was carrying the red banner, and after the election, the district changed, and it moved over to a conservative banner, and we've had the deal pulled out from under us from the federal government. And I find that very sad. It's very sad for the community. It's a deal that was done in good faith. It was something that was worked on for a long time. Our local health authority was hoping to have this to be able to entice and encourage health physicians to the area and have a place for them to stay and live. And now we see that the deal has been pulled off the table. And again, it's a deal in which they were the ones that had the contract out. It wasn't a contract that we sent to them, hoping they would sign. It was a contract that was sent to us.
Yeah, it's simply bad faith. Politicians, regardless of stripe, you would only hope that working in the people's best interest, and in this case, the town of Port aux Basques' best interest, just follow through in good faith on the contract they provided. It's just outrageous. And, I'm not sure where to go with it. I'm sure there will be a legal challenge in the offing. But once again, it's unnecessary, it's time-consuming, it's expensive. They should simply live up to their side of the bargain here. Just pathetic story.
It's just been terrible that the fact that, it went through after, like you say, after the government shut down and after the election, we were just going back to make sure then that we were going to get this deal done, to have it done. It should have been done sometime in the summer. We should have had this done. We would have had our people working on the home, whereas we would have been able to turn this over to the health authority and have them being able to utilize this home for the purposes in which we tried to negotiate the deal. But not having it done and having it pulled out and saying we no longer have this deal, it's kind of discouraging. And it was a deal that was done even before the federal election. So yeah. I'm outraged. I was hoping that we could have fixed this up before we finished. It didn't happen, and that's what made me, pick up the phone to call you today, because it is very upsetting, and very upsetting that the MP, Joanne Thompson, she hasn't, the minister responsible for the province, hasn't even reached out after we've been trying to get this bartered and looked after over the last little while.
I'm really sorry to hear this. Completely unnecessary. And congratulations on your time in office. And nothing's easy, but I suppose reflecting for you, it's hard to see anything that overshadows Fiona and the recovery in the aftermath and the death that was suffered. Quickly before we let you go, Mayor Button, are you willing or interested in giving us a bit of a report card on provincial and federal reaction and support and the timeliness of inspections and finances flowing and all those things? Because we're going through something very similar now with the wildfires, especially the devastation in CVN. Would you like to pass comment on that?
We've talked about this quite a bit, Patty, you and I and different programs and stuff. And, it was an unprecedented event that happened in our area. And it's something that's happening more often throughout our province, whether it's floods or whether it's hurricanes or it's wildfires. And it's something that we have to make sure that we are better prepared. Was everything perfect that went through our area? Well, absolutely not. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had to be on your shows and reaching out and all the things that was happening. There's been a lot of things that we need to learn from it. I've always offered myself to sit down with officials to say, what did go right and what went wrong, and be able to put that out from a municipal side and to say that, there are things we needed to learn and things we needed to do better. I think some of the changes need to happen with how the transfers of money go. We have two levels of government that are involved, one dispersing the money down to the province and the province dispersing it out, and so on and so forth. And there seems to be a little bit of a pool on that sometimes. But, overall, I had a good working relationship with the groups that were involved of trying to make it happen. There was a lot of things going on and a lot of things that happen in these type of things, and I know they're going through it now with the wildfires, and hopefully some lessons were learned from our situation and they're able to utilize it in those situations. And we just for me, Fiona was probably the biggest part of our tender over the last 4 years. It's unfortunate that it was, because there were a lot of other things that we wanted to do. But, these are the type of things when you step up and get into these positions, you don't know what you're going to face from a daily basis. And no one thought that we would ever face what we did. And I'm glad that you had mentioned, the biggest part about Fiona was all the lives that it did affect. I did say the other night in our last council meeting, we took a moment of silence just for we had a loss of life during Fiona, and I've always said that the biggest thing I want to recognize in that is for the family that was affected by that. And, we just have had quite a bit to endure over this term, and, I sit back and reflect on it, and there are days where you wonder even how you got through it all.
I appreciate your time this morning, Mayor Button. Thank you, sir.
And I thank you, Patty, for all your time and for all your listeners' support.
Appreciate it. Stay in touch. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Last day for Brian Button as the Mayor of Channel Portabask. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 5, say good morning to the Director of Communications and Advocacy at Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador. That's Alexis Foster. Good morning, Alexis. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Welcome to the program. Well, today's the big day for most of the province anyway.
It is. We're so excited. It's finally here.
The City of St. John's is an unfortunate exemption to the October deadline for the votes to be tallied. But what's the message here this morning, Alexis?
Well, the message this morning is really just get out and vote. This is your opportunity to choose who makes those important decisions for your community. Municipal elections have a direct impact on your daily life. So they impact the roads you drive on, the trails you walk, the quality of our water, and the infrastructure that keeps your community running. So we really encourage you to go out, make sure that your voice is heard. You help shape the priorities in your neighborhoods. So your voice really, really matters.
No question. I agree with that 100%. You know, for people to go out and vote also requires municipalities, and maybe with some aid coming from MNL and or the province, but the voter list question is also very important. I mean, like here in the city of St. John's, it's kind of a mess. What kind of guidance can MNL give? Because if I live in a home where there's only me and the wife living, the kids have moved out, I've been living there for 10 years, but all of a sudden I have 7 ballots show up, you know, these things need to be tidied up because faith in the integrity of elections is going to be paramount. And I'm not saying it's compromised necessarily, but optics do rule people's thoughts on things like this. So what's MNL's role to make sure voter lists are accurate in every community, including St. John's?
Well, so that would certainly fall to the Department of Municipal Affairs and Community Engagement, more so than MNL, but we want to ensure that our members have all the information that they need when it comes to the election period. So we will help support however we can. Today, we want to encourage people to know the correct voting information. So where can you vote? And how do you find that out if you don't easily know that? So we are encouraging people to check your different municipalities, their websites, their Facebook pages, to see if you can find out your voting locations. And if your town has an email or a text messaging service, you can actually find that information there. And if you are unable to find the information on where to vote, we hope that you can always call your town office and ask them for that as well.
Let's get your reaction to the Make Your Mark campaign. Try to encourage people to step forward to run for positions on council, whether it be councillors, ward councillors, deputy mayors and mayors. Give us a report card about how you think it went this go-around.
Well, we're really, really happy with the campaign this year. The campaign was about making your mark. That is the tagline of the campaign throughout previous elections. But this year we focused on you for council. So we encourage people to look at what traits and what experiences that you might have, which would be transferable to a council position. So overall, what we've been seeing is some great numbers actually show up. We are seeing some municipalities with 3 times the amount of candidates than the number of seats that they have to fill. So this is really heartening to see. I actually was speaking to a town manager a couple of weeks ago, and she told me that it was the first time that they were having an election in over 12 years. So that to me was just a phenomenal thing to hear. And from what we have been hearing from a lot of different people, as well as some people who have called in on your show as well, is that the campaign is actually what encouraged them to run this year. So we're very, very happy with that.
And I want to congratulate everyone who put their name in the hat running in for various positions in communities right across the province, because as we rightfully point out time and time again, a lot of the day-to-day affairs that people are concerned with are operated and under the authority of municipalities. So pretty important stuff. Final thoughts to you, Alexis, before we get to the news.
No, I just have to agree with you. Congratulations to everyone who put their name forward. It's certainly a big undertaking. We want to thank everyone who's volunteered in any way during this campaign session, the election campaigns for any candidates. We want to thank the municipal staff who've been working so hard to prepare for that. So good luck to everyone today, and please get out and vote.
Hear, hear. Appreciate your time, Alexis. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye. It's Alexis Foster, Director of Communications and Advocacy. That word has long troubled me. All right, quick check-in on the Twitter box. We're VOCM Open Line. You know what to do. Email address is openline@vocm.com. But my favorite, when you join us live on the program, just like PJ, we're going to finish up our chat that we had a little bit of yesterday regarding the Upper Churchill MOU. We're talking party politics. We're going up to Happy Valley Goose Bay. Whatever you want to talk about, don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Second more to the interdependent candidate running out in Harbour, Maine. That's Clem Whittle. Clem, you're on the air.
Thank you, and good morning, Patty. How are you doing?
Best kind. How about you?
I'm doing well too this morning, Patty. It's probably for a little bit of a difficult story to share with you this morning, and I was hoping to do this publicly too on some of the other news outlets, but haven't been able to do that yet. Anyway, as you know, one of the main reasons I'm running is to bring awareness and attention to the fact of how I believe that we need to change our system from the current system that we're under, the parliamentary system, to something that would work much better. And this morning, Patty, I know you heard the stories there about people talking about problems and issues, in home care and those kinds of things. and to share a story that I personally was, a part of and whatever. Back a few years ago, I'm also a volunteer worker with pastoral care, with Eastern Health. And most of my volunteer work was at the Waterford Hospital. And while I was there and witnessed, some things that were not very nice and not very, appropriate, issues of neglect and different types of abuse and so on. And so, it was so serious that I tried to talk to the minister's office at the time, and I even tried to talk to somebody in the premier's office. I never did get to speak to the minister of health at the time, and I was speaking to someone in his office, but I never did get to speak to him. And I was trying to let them know the importance and the significance of what I was sharing. Anyways, the route that he put me to was to make, to go through the Eastern Health and make an appointment with, the head of Eastern Health, the CEO, which eventually I said, if that's the only route I had, well, then that's what I would do. And so I made that appointment, and on the advice of a family member, they said to me not to do that alone, to have somebody with me at least as a witness or whatever, which I did, and it ended up being a friend who was a lawyer. Anyway, Patty, the person who was the CEO didn't show up or didn't make it to the appointment, and there was two subordinates, I guess, who showed up before the appointment. And anyway, I told them my concerns, very serious concerns, to the point I said to him at the time, I said, in my opinion, I said that, some people's lives are even at risk, and so on. And I gave it to them in writing and so on. And after I left, I didn't hear anything back. And at the same time, Patty, I was getting, for a lot of years actually, I was getting help, therapy for trauma myself, and was later found out to be, dealing with complex post-traumatic stress and so on. And so after lodging these concerns, where I did and so on, and when I went back for my next appointment with my own doctor, who was, like I said, I was in different kinds of therapy and so on, this doctor was a psychiatrist, and when I walked in for my appointment, that doctor asked me what was up about me speaking to the government about concerns and so on at the hospital and so on. And I was kind of taken back, that somebody from someone from some government office had contacted my doctor, and they were contacting me because obviously I must have mentioned to them, when I was trying to deal with them, of course, that I myself, was dealing with certain things, and so they, like I said, I was kind of taken back that. And so I asked, my doctor, I said, well, like, what were they asking? And he said, well, they were asking, what condition you were in. And so on. I said, well, what was your response? And he said, well, I told him that, Mr. Witt was in quite stable condition and so on. And so, Patty, the sadder part about that, even though I feel that what was done there was totally inappropriate, was that these concerns are 4 weeks after. I think it was about 4 weeks, Patty, or 6 weeks. You might remember it. Most people probably do. 4 to 6 weeks after I brought those concerns to them, the next young man took his own life at the Waterford Hospital. And I had that written in the things that I had there, that people who weren't being watched properly were being neglected in certain areas, that their lives were in danger. And my opinion, it's just my opinion, Betty, that had people, took it serious, and there's a possibility. I'm not saying for sure, but that man that was supposed to be checked on every few minutes, was not checked on, and he was left over whatever it was, 45 minutes or something to an hour, and long enough to, take his own life, and these are, to me, like, the kind of, and I, at the time even, I also tried to contact the opposition party at the time, and again, I heard back from nobody, and I never heard back from when I brought those things in writing. I didn't hear back from anybody, and these, I don't know why. I don't have an answer, Paddy, to why, somebody, wouldn't take something so serious and look into it, and the possibility that, that person's life may not have been lost, and that was a difficult. I got to be honest with you. I even felt guilty that I didn't do enough, Paddy, at the time. That that man died, and that I didn't do enough. That's how I felt at the time.
Okay, and not to be callous, because obviously a very important issue that you're talking about. But how does that dovetail with your concern with party politics?
Well, to me, Paddy, what I've seen so many times, I've heard people talking about this morning, is that sometimes, to me, people don't, even in certain governments or elected, they don't want to perhaps deal with certain issues because they may feel that, for some reason, it may impact them in a negative way, and that it will make, them look bad, just like I had other friends just recently who are in the foster care system and just horrible abuse, and they did after some years get a settlement, but the government of the day didn't want that to be public, so they didn't want it to go to court, so they paid them out of court and that, and just that, I guess, Paddy, it seems like so many things get passed off. And nobody, not that nobody, I don't want to be sound too black and white, but that people don't want to sometimes, and in my case, like I said, people even said to me, I should have done something legally about the fact of, people inquiring, say from, my doctor about getting information or whatever about me. But that wasn't the most important thing to me. The most important thing to me was the people who I was trying to speak up for, and I just feel that sometimes that certain, certain parties, certain governments, whatever, just don't want to deal with certain issues, and it just gets passed. People are there for a period of time, then it just gets passed on to the next group, and then sometimes it still doesn't get dealt with,
And fair enough. Party politics and, democracy is messy, and this is kind of the best form of it available. How we improve it, there's plenty of reforms required to how we approach democratic issues here in the province, right across the country. But I appreciate your time, and good luck out on the campaign trail, Clem.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Paddy.
You're welcome. You too. Bye-bye. Just very quickly, so I was asked as recently as yesterday as to why there hasn't been any provincial politics polling. And at that time, there hadn't been any release, but since then, there is one poll that has indeed been released. I was accused yesterday of sitting on the polls because I didn't like the numbers. I've said countless times that I only put so much stock in a poll anyway because it is the epitome of a snapshot in time. And okay, so I'm not sitting on it. Here's the poll results from Narrative Research. That's the only one that I've seen. And they're talking about what they're saying the Liberals hold a commanding lead. 66% of respondents said they were satisfied with the Liberal government, up 9 points from a year earlier. 26% said they were dissatisfied. Voting intentions, 59% decided voters said they would support the Liberals, up from 43%. PCs down from 30% for the PCs, down from 35. The NDP, 9%. That's down from 19%. Okay, so again, I don't put a whole lot of stock in this, but it's also important to note that this poll was done back in August, when, of course, the Premier was certainly in the media a lot, talking about wildfires and suppression and rebuilding and the like. So, yeah, there's the polling numbers, the only one we've seen. If you want to give your thoughts on it, you can do it right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number one. Jan, you're on the air.
Hey, thanks very much for having me. I just wanted a quick comment about the poll that you're talking about that went out from Narrative.
Yep.
The sample size was only 350 people back in August.
That's right.
I think that's important for people to understand. It's not quite the commanding lead that the Liberals might want people to think.
Oh, and I mean, which is why just about every single time, and for the vast majority of my time in this chair, I don't even talk about polls. I just don't. But when everyone's been clamoring for just one poll, and you're right, methodology for this. Results are part of Narrative Research Atlantic Quarterly, independent quarterly telephone survey of Atlantic Canadians drawn from a sample of 350 adult residents in the province. Survey conducted between August the 7th to the 29th, and they talk about accuracy within 5.2 percentage points, which is not exactly the most accurate thing in the world either. But you're right. It's a very small sample size. It's a snapshot in time. It was conducted during the wildfires, and that's why I added those caveats when I mentioned the numbers.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. No, like I'd say, the only poll that matters is election day. For
That's
everybody
it.
to get out and vote.
You got that right. Appreciate that, Jan.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Have a great day.
You too, bud. Bye-bye. Let's keep rolling. Let's go to Happy Valley Goose Bay. Good morning, Simeon. You're on the air.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Patty, I just want to briefly mention the experience I had with Health Labrador Hospital in Goose Bay. I've been complaining about chest pain for the longest time, and I'm on medication. I have a reflux disease, and when I was at gall gathering, I started coughing blood and a lot of blood, and finally my wife called the ambulance in Happy Valley Goose Bay, and I find it very, very frustrating, very disappointing, shock what I experienced within the hospital when I was in the hospital by the nurses and by the doctor. And one of the nurse grabbed me so hard, and I was in a lot of pain. And when he tried to check my blood pressure, I felt something wasn't right because he was grabbing. He was disappointed. He was. I realize they work very hard, long hours, and they get frustrated when they're busy. And we as a patients, as people, we felt there's something wrong because I wasn't given the medical attention what I needed. I was just left there. I mostly urinate my pants because I couldn't move, I couldn't walk. So I called up the nurse, and nobody heard me. I was so lucky that my wife came in right through the door when I was about to urinate myself on the bed, and I was shocked. And I tried to tell the doctor, try to talk to the doctor what I was feeling, and he didn't listen. He didn't listen. He just walked out on me. He was a little bit upset. I don't know why, because the emerge was so busy. I understand the overwork, but I think I've been calling about unfair treatment for us as people, because most people, our people as people felt that there is a lot of discrimination and there's a lot of racism, and I believe a few doctors said we had a meeting. I had a meeting with CEO one time when I was a deputy grand chief, and they admitted yes, they could see. One of the doctors said they could see racism and discrimination against the patients, and he admitted to that. And right now, it's still happening. That was years ago, and they were going to do something about a better health care for people, but it's not happening. But something needs to happen, because I've seen and witnessed how when I was at the hospital, I go back and forth, and I see some people, how they've been talked to, how they've been treated. And one of the girls from Shazi told me, Simeon, can you help me out, because I was so treated really bad. She said, I said, okay, and I translated with her. Yes, I could see I could hear the tone of voice and the way she was treated, and I felt so bad, and I couldn't do anything, because if I felt something, I know the securities would probably escorted me out of the hospital. Well, that's why we can't speak in a hospital, because you're going to be escorted out by securities or ODR peace, and that's what usually happens. And I think there are two elections. I realize that there's provincial election, and there's also MIFN, Band Council having an election. But I will talk to one of the candidates today if I can, and I'm going to remind them this has got to stop. We need to treat people equally. It doesn't matter who you are, if you're Inuit, white person, or Innu, or Philippine, or whatever. Everybody's got to be treated right, because I felt so bad, and my health is very declining, and I was so mad, and we were talked down. My wife was there with me because I got a hard hearing, and they said something. The nurse said something to my wife, and I didn't really like it. And I said, if my wife leaves, I'm going to walk out too, because I was so sick because I was coughing a lot of blood, and I was very disappointed. And the way people have been marginalized, discriminated, and I know there's a marginalization within Health Labrador care system. I know that there's a lot of documents people been writing. There's barriers to health care for the people in Labrador, and I think that's got to stop. That's got to change. And I'm hoping to talk to the CEO and talk to the head of the doctor, and I'm going to talk to the chief, whoever is a candidate in Natoshish, and trying to advocate for us as people, as patients within Health Labrador, the way we've been treated. And I haven't heard from the Grand Chief or Deputy Grand Chief fighting for us, but it's not happening. But I really hope whoever gets in the band council in Natoshish to advocate these things, how we experience, because we are humans, we are not animals, and we need to be treated with the care, and the professionals have to be professionals rather than become the racist professionals, and that's what I see, and I've seen that for many years, and I've been in the hospital. When I was diagnosed with cancer, I didn't get the proper care, and finally the priest from Shahadi came to my house and told my wife, you got to take Simeon to St. John's and get the help that he needs. And when I was in St. John's, I was treated like a human, and the doctor told me, said, if you had 2 more days staying in Labrador, your life would end. You're so lucky you came. And right away he admitted me to the hospital. Within a couple of days, I had surgery, and that's the kind of service that I see in St. John's, because it's not. St. John's is very different. People are very different. They respect you. Within here in Labrador Health, they don't treat you, and that's why I went to St. John's Hospital. They treated me respect. They treated me human, and they said to me, "Don't worry, we'll look after you." That's the first time I ever heard professionals saying that. Within here, it's not happening. Why? I don't know. And the candidates or provincial candidates, they need to look into this. And the reason why I said that, and I want to point out that my uncle, he died in local clinic. He went 5 times in the clinics, and they keep sending him home. The 5th time he went within the same day, he died in the clinic. And my younger sister's son, he was sick for 1 month. 1 month. He keep taking his son to the clinic, and the baby was so sick. And finally they called me at night and said, "Simeon, you got to come to the clinic." And then my little nephew died in the hospital. Why does it take so long? I mean, if I was professional, I would probably send out the baby and probably send him to the Janeway Hospital, and that boy could have lived if he was given a proper care and given the opportunity to see professional. And And that's a fact.
Understood. I'm sorry to hear that was the treatment that anybody would get in any healthcare facility, clinic or hospital or otherwise. And I hope you're doing okay, Simeon. I have to get to the news break on time, but thank you for yours. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Patty.
You're welcome. Yeah. Bye-bye. All right, let's get a break on time. When we come back, Dave will tell me where we're going. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 6. PJ, you're on the air.
Well, good morning, Patty. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to just talk about a game that I think is on Hydro-Quebec's website, but it would be useful to your listeners and for young and old students or adults. And I think it provides 2 opportunities for people to see and get informed on the current, clean energy options, which there are 7 of them, according to this game. And it also comes to provide really what are the options Quebec has. And I think from my point of view, it will surprise you what their options are. They're very limited options. So I just want to describe the game. The game is called the Energy Mix Game, Mission 2035. So your mission is to play this. You have to select between the 7 options of energy, 9,000 megawatts. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that's really about twice what Churchill Falls number 1 produces today. And even after all of the additional Gull Island and Churchill Falls number 2, et cetera, and the retrofit, they're only going to be about 7,200 megawatts in Labrador for the Churchill side, and versus 9,000. So long story short, it's a lot of electricity. And that's what the Hydro-Quebec wants out for the next 10 years. The options are this: solar, wind, renewable gas, hydropower, of course, conservation, which is cut back on energy use in the province of Quebec, natural gas, and nuclear. So those are the 7. Once you pick your mix, what you think is the ideal mix, it will educate you. It will tell you, how they do about greenhouse gas, how they are on cost, and more importantly, how they are on reliability. It's an eye-opener. Bottom line is this: once you do that, it gets submitted, and it will come back, and then it will compare you to what Hydro-Quebec says is the ideal mix. Very important step here. Because what it comes back to, and I'm going to spoil it a bit, but bear with me, is that the ideal mix, according to Hydro-Quebec, is 50% of that 9,000 should come from hydropower source. Bingo. How much do you think should come from nuclear? I will tell you, they say 0. That's a surprise. And the others, wind, solar, they're dipping their toe in it. That's all I call how I put it. They're very reliant on this hydropower source. And the 0% on nuclear provided an opportunity to investigate that a bit. And this is what I found, is when Michael Sabier took over as the CEO in Hydro-Quebec in 2003, he immediately launched a study on the recommissioning of the nuclear facility they have in Quebec. Yes, they have one there. They decommissioned it in 2012, took it offline because it had to be retrofitted and there wasn't a stomach in Quebec to do with or deal with the cost as well. It's still sitting there. But in August of 2023, it was determined, and in Quebec, it was not socially acceptable to go down that avenue. There you go. So they don't have a nuclear option in Quebec. And then when the game it will also tell you is that the game says natural gas. Natural gas is not an option. They don't see that in their mix either because it's generating greenhouse gas. That brings it down to 4 things: wind, solar, that they're dipping their toe in, hydropower, that they're fully reliant on, and conservation methods.
Yeah, just a couple of quick notes. Social license is a little bit of a thumb on the scale business because Hydro-Quebec wants what Hydro-Quebec wants, and they want more hydro than anything else. And I played the Energy Mix game. That's been on their website since sometime mid last year. So I've had a look at it a couple of times. Not really a whole lot of updating of numbers provided by this energy mix game on their website. And so social license is, I think, it almost feels like they're rigging the game a little bit here. So that's my initial thoughts on the energy mix game. And nuclear, look, it comes with enormous upfront costs, but in the long-term play on the cost of producing power with small nuclear reactors, there's certainly an argument to be made for that to be a go-to for jurisdictions that want to get into increasing energy capacity.
Yes, possibly, but I think the output, the megawatts, is surprisingly low on these things. A big nuclear plant, 800 personnel to operate it, 600 megawatts. You know, a project like Gull Island produces 4 times that. So these options in nuclear are not as rosy as it appears. Patty, I just want to move on and let you go. The federal government issued their clean electricity strategy in August of 2025, just a little short time ago. In there, very interesting themes on trying to develop cooperation between provinces, the federal government, et cetera. And, you know, the goal being that we have to get off fossil fuels by 2050 and get electrification and go green, bottom line. One of the actions of this in 2025, so, you know, it has to happen within the next couple of months, let's say, is this release of a discussion paper on interjurisdictional, what they call interiorities. Bottom line is a big word, but all it means is cooperation, sharing the transmission lines, going through different territories. This is very interesting coming out, this document, this 59-page document. We don't hear hardly anything about it, but there it is, put out by the federal government, brand spanking new, and it talks about cooperation. And here we are in Newfoundland, basically with this MOU being handcuffed to Quebec for the next 50 to 65 years. You have to ask yourself, who is really pushing this MOU to get this thing signed in such a hurry when the spirit and themes out there are anything but cooperation? And it just seems to me that Newfoundland is going to miss out on an opportunity to really shine and to become wealthy over what's going to happen now with this MOU. Quebec's going to get wealthy and prosperous, and Newfoundland's going to stay in the same position they are. That's quite a shame. So, you know.
But PJ, how can you say that we're going to stay in the same position?
Well, relatively speaking, Quebec is going to enjoy the growth of the cost of electricity and the market share that they have, and being able to generate wealth. All kinds of sorts of things regarding how when they have access to put that energy to market. They're paying very little for it, for Newfoundland, and relatively speaking is what we're talking about. Sure, it's better than the current state of Churchill Falls' original agreement, but it still has such a gap. Quebec is going to take the lion's share of the wealth, and Newfoundland is not going to be able to participate because we're in the exact same dilemma. So that's the problem that's faced with the principles that are in this current MOU, and they're not about to change in any definitive agreement. So it's very problematic.
The predicament, I think what you're referring to is, you know, if we went to act alone or we went to act with a partner, say just for instance Fortis at Gull Island, it's still a stranded asset until there's some way to get the power out of there, which is why I carefully include the potential for, if it ever comes to pass, and this whole east-west energy corridor, it changes literally everything. It truly does. So how that cannot be incorporated into an eventual definitive agreement is beyond me. Same thing when I talk about every single time. If there's direct federal government involvement with transmission in the province of Quebec that will be used to flow power from the upper and Gull into various markets, whether it be in Ontario, Quebec, or into the northeastern United States, that changes things. So those are two of my primary concerns about what may or may not be continually negotiated here. If, let's say, for instance, we go at Gull, 2,225 megawatts, and Fortis is our partner, that transmission cost to get out of Labrador into a market is extraordinary. I mean, Muskrat is as much a transmission project as it is a hydroelectric dam. So, I mean, just think about $1.5 billion for the Maritime Link to carry 500 megawatts in 2018 or $19. Imagine trying to flow 2,225 megawatts down the Long Range Mountains over a newly created Maritime Link to carry 2,000 megawatts to get it to market. I mean, I speak to people much smarter than me and some senior people in the energy business, and they say that's not anything that anybody's going to support. The business model doesn't make any sense. So Quebec as the logical and geographical partner, whether it boils back down to all the protections are there, price elasticity, inflation, replacement cost, risk, all of those things, I'm not so sure the general public, including me, have a full grasp on all of those concepts inside of something that we're talking about $500 billion worth of value over the course of 60 years.
No, you're absolutely right on many of those points. The government, the Liberal government, has not informed the public. That's quite a shame. Newfoundland Hydro hasn't informed the public. That's quite a shame. Nobody, I think, is opposing that Quebec could be a better partner in this arrangement. That's all this is about. Is it the best deal? Could more money be awarded to Newfoundland as part of this thing? I think when you look at the Quebec's options, I believe that could be very much the case. And that's what this is all about. Nobody's saying we have to go through another means to string wires down to all the other places. That's not what it's about. It's about getting the best deal for Newfoundland. This MOU doesn't show that. But I think this cooperation that this strategy, clean energy strategy that the feds have come out with now, it starts to lay the groundwork for this thing, cooperation to work together as a federation. People have resources not just in Atlantic Canada but across the country. We had to start working together for our best interest as a country, and this provides an opportunity for Newfoundland that I think didn't exist before. But if we handcuff ourselves to Quebec in this agreement, which your government is so eager to sign, and with the election around the corner, I think that this has so come to such a forefront right now. Forget about April next year. We're talking now. If the Liberals get elected, they seem to have to go ahead to sign off on this MOU carte blanche, and that's very problematic. And they put Newfoundland public in this position. Let's be clear about that. They had an opportunity to study this. They had an opportunity to call the election before this, but no, they put it in at the last minute, and here we are trying to, with an uninformed public is what I would say, because they didn't provide the public with a reasonable, legitimate, and a document that people could read. This is terrible, a terrible thing for your leaders to have done to you. And I sit back and look at it. I've gone through the paragraphs. I can dissect it, but I have a background in this stuff. And I'm looking at it. I'm saying there's no way that those principles should be the starting point of this discussion. Yet that's where you have it. So, okay. I mean, people have to really take note that if they are not informed on this, then you have to ask yourself, why was that? Why would a government not inform their citizens? You have to ask yourself, what is it they're hiding? And I can tell you there's numerous problems in there. And just one that I will leave with you on this.
Quickly.
Is, to me, the control. The control of those two mega projects in Labrador is a huge mistake. I see Quebec taking many of the higher paid jobs. For example, all of the engineering is already designed. Who's going to do the engineering? An outfit in Quebec owned by Hydro-Quebec. And all of that all that business is going to be conducted in French. How is Newfoundland going to be able to interject into those level positions? Not going to happen. All that wealth, those individuals, their spouses, their children, going to be paid into the Quebec Treasury versus Newfoundland Treasury.
And some of that sense. We actually don't know yet, which is also a problem.
Also a problem, but what people, I think, the last point I want to let people know in Newfoundland Labrador is Quebec has full control over this. Don't kid yourself. Newfoundland Hydro has no responsibility in the decision-making of those two mega projects for the next 15 years, up to $30 billion worth of expenses. And at the end of the day, Newfoundland is responsible for 60% of it. It makes zero sense that you would go down this avenue.
Well, that lumped-in statement includes 2 transmission projects, an expansion at the upper, and the production or the construction at Gull, which all have different levels of risk, different levels of equity stake, different levels of borrowing. So that's where I think some of the confusion does indeed lie. I mean, it's not 4 projects, it's 2, because you're not going to build a dam or expand a dam without building the transmission to accommodate additional power. So that's where I think a bulk of the confusion lies, to be honest with you. It's all rolled into one. If we had them as standalone deals, which I don't even know if it was ever even possible, because Quebec came looking for Gull. That's it. We wanted more money at the Upper Churchill and some sort of protection at Gull Island insofar as risk goes. So to start with that as the starting point of conversation becomes very, very muddy when all of a sudden both of those conversations have to happen at the exact same time, because it just makes it extremely complicated. PJ, I got to get going to the break, but I appreciate the follow-up today.
All right, sounds good. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's get a break in. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the PC candidate running Virginia Waters Pleasantville. That's Patrick Condon. And good morning, Patrick. You're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Daly. Thanks for having me on.
Happy to do it.
Yes, and I just have to clarify. It's G. Patrick.
Oh, that's...
I don't want people going in. Yes, my gosh. It's caused such confusion at the doors. I wish I had just stuck with Patrick, but we're in it now. It's G. Patrick Condon.
Okay, fair enough.
I wanted to talk about my experience, I guess, at the doors. I got the nomination back in January, and it was relayed to me that, for somebody that has had no past political experience, the only way to do this was not force. And so I don't know if you've ever had a experience in canvassing, but it can be pretty daunting, but it's also been incredibly enlightening. The District of Virginia Waters and Pleasantville, there's a vast difference of wealth and class, and there seems to be a lot of commonality between what people are concerned about. And a lot of it has to do with, the pillars that all the political parties are talking about this, which is safer communities. But I sort of want to get into you touched how do we get safer communities.
Patrick, the connection is terrible. Maybe shuffle around a little bit, see if we can clear it up.
Sure.
That's a little better. Go ahead.
How about now? Yeah.
Not bad.
Sorry. So how much of my rant did you guys miss?
No, just the last few seconds just got a bit crackly, that's all.
Basically, where do safer communities come from? And like you touched upon at the beginning of the show, it is a matter of poverty and addictions and mental health issues. And what I've been seeing is a mass increase in areas in the district, neighborhoods where people have said they've lived there for 30, 40 years. They said it was always known as a rough area, but particularly in the last 5 years, it's gone to a whole new level. And there's been shootings. That there's any gun violence in Newfoundland is a very new and troubling thing. Excuse me. And so then the question becomes, where does the addiction start? And, again, from conversations that I've had with parents, it seems to be something that happens a lot when kids are turning 13, 14 years old. They start to, or like everybody around that age, you start to develop anxiety and you start to develop maybe anger issues and depression. And then if your parents are able to pick up on this change and they want to get you into counseling, a lot of the times it can take a year or 2 years before you can get in to see anybody. And a lot of the times kids will start to self-medicate. And then once those kids go down that path, it's very hard to get them off of it again. Once somebody becomes addicted to, drugs or alcohol, if you can ever get them back, it's a miracle. They talk a lot in AA and NA about God and miracles, because it is a miracle when somebody is able to find recovery. So the best way that I know about getting anybody free from addiction is rehab programs. And one of the things that I've heard about is that we had a bill that was passed 5 or 10 years ago, Bill 55, that would allow parents to involuntarily admit their kids into rehab programs. But the policy of the current government is that would be a human rights violation against a child. And so it really takes the power out of the parents' hands to be able to help their kids. And so
that's Bill 55 is proposed legislation in Alberta.
No. So I could be mistaken. I'm not gonna deny that. But there's a Bill 55 that was debated. I think it was like 2019 or 2016 that was passed and then shelved. That was about secure care, I think it was called.
Yeah, Bill 55 is, it was a proposed amendment to the Health Statutes Act in Alberta. It was called, I think, the Compassionate Intervention Act. So that was an Alberta provincial piece of legislation, not a federal piece of legislation.
Okay, well, I don't know. I'm looking at it now, but my mistake. Anyways,
or it's either Bill 55 or 53. They were all proposed at the exact same time, but they all deal with addictions and substance abuse and treatments and stuff. Yes, that's absolutely right.
Yeah. Nevertheless, the point being is that this is one of the sort of major things that I think we should really take a look at enforcing, and I think when it comes down to what the issues is in the election, it's really like a political philosophy, and in some cases, the thought is that things like safe injection sites, clean needles, that this is what we do to show empathy and sympathy for people that are in addictions. My take on it is those types of programs don't really get anybody off of any drugs. It sort of prolongs without any solution. And again, from my understanding and from my opinion, I think if you're going to try and get people off of drugs and alcohol, the only way to do it, the most success you'll get, is through rehab programs.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to expand detox and rehab, shorten the timeline between detox and rehab. No question about it. A bit late for the news here, G. Petroconin, but I appreciate your time. I wish you good luck out there.
Thanks, sir.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, let's get to that news break. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 5. So good morning to one of the candidates running for deputy mayor here in town. That's Bianca Lono. Bianca, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you doing this morning?
That's kind. How about you?
Oh, it's a day. I did want to take a quick second to just thank you and Dave for everything that you do to make sure that you get the communication and the word out to across the province. I think it's amazing what you do, and I just wanted to give you a bit of kudos there this morning. But what I really wanted to talk about, as a candidate and someone living in this city and clearly new to politics, I'm a little bit concerned about what's happening with the municipal election. As you know, the city of St. John's has changed the election date to October 8th, and that is the only municipality across the province. And it's because of the postal strike. And I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't have somewhat of a contingency plan in place. It's not the first time we've had a postal strike, but I mean, if we were in the wintertime and we had another snowmageddon, we would have to have a contingency plan in place, and it feels like it was a little bit of a scramble. And as you mentioned earlier this morning with Municipal NL, those provincial ads are still running saying that the election is on the 2nd. I'm getting messages from people and also other candidates reaching out because people are confused about the actual date. And I don't know, it's confusing at its best, but it's worse. It kind of feels like it could be like a little bit of, I hate to say this word, but a little bit of voter suppression because voters show up on the wrong day and they're given, they don't know what's going on, and it kind of undermines the entire process. And then you look at Ward 2. They just announced now we've got another new location. So we had the Knights of Columbus, then we were going to the First Light Community Center, and now we've got that new added, the new voting center at the Pool House on Bannerman Street, which was really a last-minute scramble after residents raised alarms because of the construction and accessibility, and really accessibility should never be an afterthought. I think everyone deserves an equal chance to cast their ballot.
Just very quickly, where exactly is the confusion? Because when you move around polling stations, that can be confusing. My go-to when people are asking me questions is to go right to stjohnsvotes.ca and or Access St. John's with the updated information available there. So polling stations moving around is one thing, but what is another example of confusion, Bianca, for you and what you're hearing?
Give you an example. So my uncle, for example, he doesn't use the internet. So he went down to City Hall yesterday to go get that information and to find out if his ballot had in fact been registered. And so not everyone's using the internet, right? I mean, I know we rely a lot on social media and making sure that, but that's not always the best way. I mean, I'm sure you can attest to this. A lot of people listen to Open Line to find out what's going on. So I don't think that is necessarily can be the only form of communication to get that message out there. I'm actually going to pop by the Knights of Columbus later on to find out if there's been anyone. I know that they did put up signage there, but the last-minute changes have made it a little bit tricky. And even for candidates, our agents are a big part of the process, keeping this process transparent. I mean, I can speak for myself. My particular agent booked her vacation to around the election and now will not be able to be here for Election Day. And I mean, I know that these things happen, but again, it's all been very last minute. We literally just got the email to give people time, to let them know what the agent process and how to get their passes if they want to attend at the day of voting. So it becomes it's been a little bit of a last minute scramble. And I feel a lot of the pressure has been put on candidates to get the message out there, to make sure that everyone is getting that message. And so back to those ads that are running that have mixed dates on it. I mean, we're the only municipality in the province that has a postponement. Actually, there was one more, and that was due to the wildfires. But I mean, Alberta's got a municipal election going on right now. Everything is standard status quo. And at the end of the day, elections is really about participation, So between the city and municipal NL, I think it should be made a little bit easier for people to vote, not harder. And right now, the mixed messages and the late fixes, those are just creating some barriers to access. And I just think that it just adds up to can be a very dangerous picture, because we have fewer people voting or less confidence in democracy, and voices are not being heard. And to me, that's not acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that there's an interruption in the normal flow of campaigns and election day, for some, it does indeed present a barrier potentially and or add to the confusion. I think that was inevitable, especially when there was such a close overlap between municipal elections and the provincial election. That wasn't helpful either.
No, I agree. Actually, that's a good point that you just put that out there, because if anyone's listening, today is the deadline to request a special ballot for the provincial election, aka a mail-in ballot. So if anyone is wondering about that, today is the deadline to do that. And again, that's another thing that people had to do online. And so I've been trying to help my uncle make sure that he gets, his special ballot, because he prefers to do a mail-in. But now, we're kind of wondering what's going to happen with that. I mean, we don't know where the Canada Post strike is going to end up between now and 2 weeks from now, right? So it's just I don't know. I struggle with this. I'm an old-fashioned voter. I don't know about you, but I like to go into the poll. It's part of, I think ever since I was able to vote, that was something I looked forward to, was going into the poll. And maybe that might encourage people to maybe want to shift and maybe move away from mail-in ballots and wanting to actually physically go into the poll. But at the same time, you need lots of notice, and it needs to be really clear about where those are located and how to access that.
Yeah, I think the addition of mail-in to in-person actually broadens access for voters. Like, I'm going to mail in my ballot for the City of St. John's. It's actually my car to drop off at the Paul Reynolds Centre later today. So I kind of don't mind that additional feature. When it comes to the provincial election, federal elections, I go to the polling station. I always do. That's just my preferred choice. Whether it be advanced polling opportunities or election day proper, that's kind of how I handle, and it's just me and how I do my personal business when it comes to voting. And I always take the opportunity to vote when I'm given the opportunity to do so.
Of course, we all want to. I mean, but I'm sure you heard too. Like, there's a lot of people that have been getting multiple ballots showing up at their doors. That's scary to me. I'd like to think most people are going to be honest and they're not going to submit them, or they turn them in. But we don't know that, right? I mean, I think that's just that's a conversation for another day. I think in terms of how that happens and how often those lists are checked. Because I guess for me personally, I was under the impression that the federal voting list, municipal, provincial, they should kind of be more aligned. I mean, that's why we have Elections Canada, to make sure that those lists are kept up to date. I mean, I have a friend of mine that's up in Labrador now, and they may not be able to make it back to be able to vote, and to be able to get in, to get to their particular polling station because they don't have their special ballot yet, because the deadline is today. So, I mean, I think there's just a lot of layers to this. At the end of the day, I just think, between the city, municipal, NL, and even the provincial, for the provincial election, it would be nice if they corrected the ads. I think it might be a little. Well, no, it's not too late, because after today, we'll be the only municipality that has an election on the 8th. But just making sure that every resident knows exactly where and when to vote, and not leaving it up to the candidates to have to do that hustle. Because really, we're not the ones managing the election, and just commit that accessibility and fairness will be guaranteed, and upfront in every election from now on. Because I think people they don't trust the process, and if the process doesn't work, then democracy suffers.
I appreciate the time, Bianca. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Patty, for your time, and have yourself a great rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bianca Lono, running for Deputy Mayor at St. John's. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Say good morning to former Crown Prosecutor. That's Mike Murray. Mike, you're on the air.
Yeah, good morning, Patty.
Good morning to you.
I wanted to call in. I wanted to talk about something that the Premier said yesterday while out on campaign. Sean Patton, from the head of the Crown Attorneys Association, was in the media talking about how last year, the government promised to hire 6 new prosecutors. They managed to round up 4, but in the meantime, 5 people have quit, so they're actually 1 down from where they were last year with 700 more files. And the Premier's talking about hiring an extra 100 police officers. So when they asked him about it yesterday, the Premier did not agree that more cops meant more charges. I mean, that is such a nonsensical statement, Patty. I mean, everybody, even people who watch Hudson and Rex or Law and Order, know that the police go out to lay charges. I mean, everything that the Premier knows about the criminal justice system seems like it could be written on the back of a stamp. I mean, it is. It's very poor in my opinion. The prosecution service is really, really in a crisis situation. The people who are leaving are like experienced Crown attorneys, people who can do murder trials, people who can do long-term sexual abuse trials, people who can do home invasions. I mean, I'm not saying anything about the people that they're picking up, but I mean, I remember when I started as a Crown having to write down all the questions before I went into court. You know what I mean? It's not like not every lawyer is created equal. Experience makes a big difference, and we're losing experienced people. And also, I mean, not every file is equal. One file could be a guy who walks into a liquor store, he's caught on video putting 6 bottles of rum in one of those recycling bags, and another file is Tony Humby. I mean, they all just count as a file.
Exactly right. I'll just read a quote from the Premier yesterday when asked about the need for more prosecutors. Police officers are not necessarily going to be there only after a crime happens. They're there to make sure people are safe and that crimes don't happen. That's aspirational stuff, and maybe we will see some crime deterred because of an enhanced police presence. Like I say all the time, nothing slows you down on the highway quite like a police cruiser. But aspirational versus rational are kind of 2 different things here. No question in my mind. More cops, more investigations that come to a conclusion, very likely more charges laid, consequently more files on the desk of Crown prosecutors. And if we're at a net down 1, given the fact that they hired 4 or 5 resigned, that's just in the eastern zone. So I don't necessarily, I agree with you, and I don't really understand the Premier's assertion here, given the fact his own government said they're going to hire 18 new Crown prosecutors over the course of 3 years, so 6 per year, so they acknowledge there's a need. So if there was a need then, why is there not an enhanced need now?
Yeah, you know what? I want to read a quote too. This is from Lynn Moore, former Crown Attorney. She posted this on Facebook. Once again, John Hogan is demonstrating complete ignorance of the justice system. More officers means more charges. Everyone knows this except John Hogan. You know, I mean, when you have people in the system who know what they're talking about, telling you that we've barely got enough crowns to handle what's going on now. It's kind of a crisis now. And if you talk about adding more police and more charges, I mean, you're not going to improve the situation.
Yeah, I mean, that foot in mouth about, sexual abuse survivors or victims aren't re-traumatized in court. Well, we know full well that is absolutely demonstrably not true. It was just, I couldn't believe anybody actually said it. Acknowledging shortcomings, this is a political miscalculation that I think far too many politicians fall prey to. Even if it's your government, your policy, if and when it fails or comes up short, public acknowledgement of it and to try to put things back on the rails is actually a political victory. It's turning a blind eye, deaf ear, and pretending that the policy is working or will work when we all know it's not. It's just really political harry-carry. Acknowledge it and move on. I think the public would actually accept and probably applaud when politicians have a bit of self-awareness and say, okay, that was wrong, here's what we should do, and here's how we're going to measure it. We got to get back on track. Okay, I think people can accept that.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, you can come out and say we're struggling, but we're trying to move forward versus, everything is great. I mean, when people know that it's not.
Yeah, and this is not a John Hogan or Liberal Party of Newfoundland and Labrador topic. I just think politicians of various stripes, provincially, federally, municipally, they all fall prey to it. The ability to admit when you're wrong or have come up short is something that human nature will accept. I mean, we just do. Some people will reject every single thing comes out of his mouth or Wakem's mouth or Din's mouth because that's their ideological stance. But I think for the vast majority of us, we're all just trying to get by. We're all somewhere bumping around in the center of the political spectrum. But unfortunately, the very loud voices on either side of the spectrum get all the attention. When I don't think most people in this province or in this country kind of think like that or feel like that. We're all just doing our thing, raising our families, going to work, trying to keep the wolf away from the door. Pretty standard, normal, center of the political spectrum stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, if somebody breaks into your house and they're unlucky enough to leave, they go through a window and they're unlucky enough to leave blood on the glass, and 2 years later, a charge finally gets laid, and a year after that, it went away and nobody can tell you why. I mean, that's the kind of things, bread and butter criminal justice issues that really need to be addressed.
I agree. So we will, and I can't and I don't speak for individuals with what's important to them this go around, because it depends on who you are, where you are. It depends on your lot in life. I think the vast majority of people will just rely on pocketbook issues, right? Yes, we can incorporate public safety. Yes, the Upper Churchill, and yes, healthcare, and yes, everything else under the sun. But I think a lot of people, they just think about their pocketbook normally.
Yeah.
Anyway. Anything else, Mike, before we get to the news break?
Nope, that's it.
Appreciate your time.
No problem.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, I mean, I think it's patently obvious that we need more Crown prosecutors, because he makes an important point there. Of the 5 that left the office in the Eastern region, no question, whether it's all 5 or most of the 5, will be experienced attorneys. And experience is important, because not everyone fresh out of law school and fresh from articling can take on the Tony Humby case or take on the current Belbin murder trial. So there's a lot to what he says. At one hand, acknowledging the fact that the the Office of Crown Prosecutors requires at least 18 new Crown prosecutors added to the roster over the course of 3 years, sounded like a decent understanding of the concerns being voiced by Sean Patton and others, and the need to get it right. I mean, an overworked attorney, like an overworked correctional officer, like an overworked nurse, is bound to not be able to deliver his or her best day in and day out. It's just nature of the beast. We're not all built to have that amount of workload, and it's such important work heaped onto our shoulders without some relief or adding some human resources to the fray. Right? Right. Check it out on Twitter. We're VOCM Up Online. You know what to do. Follow us there. Comments are welcome, good and bad. Email address is openline@vocm.com. You know me. My fave is join us live on the air. When we come back, we're going to have more conversation about the MOU, There's a lady calling from Labrador talking about barriers for disabled people. And I mentioned Lisa Slaney off the top of the program the last 2 days. She's the executive director of Grace Sparks House down in Marystown. It's all about the funding for shelters that's coming up short. Those conversations and you right after this. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 2. Saying more to a gentleman seeking re-election in Ward 4 here in town. That's Tom Davis. Tom, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning.
I want to just start with the election being moved to St. John's. Just to remind voters that it's stjohns.ca/votes. Is the website they go to check, and you can always call 311 or email access@stjohns.ca to find out if we received ballots. And just to let people know, I've spoken to people in my ward that actually that a husband and wife both dropped off at the same time. His was received by us, and hers is not received by us. So unfortunately, we really need people. If you want to get your vote heard, which is so important that you do, it's an important election. Every election is important. You know, there's a lot of new people being elected, going to be elected regardless in the city of St. John's. So encourage people to go to that website or call 311 and find out whether we've received your vote. Up to Tuesday, we only had 16,000 votes received between Canada Post and drop boxes, which would be half as many as you would normally see in an election. So really concerned about people getting their votes counted. Of course, you can actually contact 311 and make arrangements to pick up a new ballot, which you then can drop off at any of the drop boxes, including in front of the City Hall, up to Election Day. But then on Election Day, you have to go in person to vote at your designated polling station, which again is all online. I'm not going to list it off. People won't know, but anybody who wants to reach out to me, they can, and I can, regardless of what ward they're in, I can point them in the right direction.
Fair enough.
Okay, I'm taking off the council hat, and I want to really strongly weigh in on the MOU. I've spent a lot of time trying to absorb, as I know a lot of your listeners have, and I know you have, trying to absorb all the data, all the information, all the experts who are weighing in. Over the last 10 years, I've spoken to experts who didn't feel comfortable weighing in when the Muskrat Falls review was happening, like when we were trying to decide whether we were going to go ahead with it. There was a lot of pressure within the community to go along with the government at the time and Newfoundland Hydro / Nalcor at the time pushing forward with the Muskrat Falls, and we know how that turned out. And, as more and more people from different political stripes or no political stripe come forward with analysis, with data, it's becoming safer and safer to do it. And I just encourage more and more people to lend their voices on either side of the equation to the conversation.
For me, when we include Muskrat Falls in the conversation about the UCMOU, I think it just adds further confusion. I mean, they're really vastly different proposals. I mean, for starters, Muskrat Falls was us and us alone. We had all of the risk. We were the only customer outside of the 20% that we owe to Nova Scotia Power or Emera across the Maritime Link. So it was just all us, all the way, all the risk, the only customer. That makes it a different conversation for me. But when people hear Muskrat Falls, all they can hear is boondoggle. So I think we get off on a very slanted foot when Muskrat is incorporated into the UC conversation. What do you think?
Well, I think 2 of the 3 parties involved in this negotiation are still involved in. We're still involved in Muskrat. So we had the provincial government and the bureaucrats on one side, plus Newfoundland Hydro / Nalcor also as part of that process. So I don't think we discount Muskrat Falls as much as we should, in that you can see how tunnel vision occurs. You can see how bias occurs and how you start going down a track, as well as you can see how when you get your marching orders, as senior bureaucrats say at Newfoundland Hydro, let's get this deal done, or Hydro-Quebec has come to us with this opportunity, let's see if we can get a deal done. The people's mindset starts changing and their focus changes, and the deeper and deeper you get into a process, the more committed you become to it. It takes an awful strong person to stand up in the, in the boardroom and say, guys, like, I don't think this is the best deal anymore when you're, 6 months down and your premier's torn up, supposedly performatively torn up a contract. It gets harder and harder to turn the ship around. So I think I agree with you that it does complicate it. But for me, this comes down to trust in the three parties. It comes down to what's in the long-term best interest of our province, of our children, of our grandchildren, and of us. And also, how does this play into where we are and where we're going to go? So I just want to break down each thing. So trust in the partners. We already talked about the partners, the provincial government and Newfoundland Hydro, but to dig a little deeper with Newfoundland Hydro, Newfoundland Hydro's job is to provide power to the residents of the province of Newfoundland and Labrador at the lowest cost possible, but making sure it's reliable. Like that would be their mandate. And so when you look at how they're behaving, I will argue with provincial government support over time, we have most people may not be aware of this, but if you're on the island of Newfoundland and Labrador, or if you're on the island of Newfoundland, or you're on the coast of Labrador, we all pay the same amount, 15.2 cents, and it's gone up significantly over the last few years. Muskrat Falls is driving it, as well as just inflation and cost of goods sold just to provide services. However, if you're in Labrador, in Lab City or Goose Bay or whatever, you're paying 3.15 cents. So a lot of people aren't aware of this, but the residents of Labrador pay 3.15 cents, and their costs are not going up. And if the Liberal government follows through on their promise of taking HST off, it'll come off those people as well. So people need to sit with the fact that their neighbors in the same province, potentially even just a small flight away or a drive away, are paying 1/5 of what they're paying. So that's not equitable and that's not fair. And Premier Fury said that their rates will not go up. And I don't understand how you square that circle. So that's the first thing. Then Newfoundland Hydro is buying from Corner Brook Pulp and Paper power at 27.5 cents a kilowatt hour. That also really doesn't make a lot of sense in the big scheme of things when you overlay it on how much we're prepared to sell power out of Upper Churchill as we go forward for power. It's significantly less. So that's Newfoundland Hydro. That calls into the equity and fairness and how much we can really trust Newfoundland Hydro. And really the governing party, who for some reason is, part of our rates could be subsidized by people in Labrador paying more money. I don't understand why that's okay. I mean, we have a lot of hydro on the island. During the summertime, we're pulling hydro from ourselves. We don't need Muskrat Falls. I mean, Beta Spear and Cat Arm and the various number of projects that are across the island. Like, I don't know why residents wouldn't be paying a lot less if Labrador residents are paying less. So there's that. Now we get into Hydro-Quebec and trust. So a person close to me, actually has a job working for a Quebec company building a hospital in Halifax, and there's 100 people on that job, and 95 of them are from Quebec and 5 of them are from Newfoundland. Well, the only people who don't get a living out allowance on that job site are the 5 Newfoundlanders. That's an interesting statement. Obviously, that's a private company. I was also speaking to an engineering company the other day who wanted to go bid on the Gull Island Labrador work, and lo and behold, they have to register in Quebec. Now, anybody who has any familiarity with registering a company as a Newfoundland or an Ontario company or whatever in Quebec, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but you're really good luck. And the thing is, if you're an engineer and you want to practice in Quebec, you have to write their exam. The only province you have to do this. You can register in any other province. You have to write their exam in Quebec. So again, I don't know how many engineers out there are fluent in Quebec. The engineering test will be hard enough. So this is the overlay, and again, Bernard Coffey mentioned this. Quebec really still does not acknowledge the fact that Labrador and the headwaters of the Churchill are even owned by Newfoundland and Labrador. So this is our partner. This is the group of people and the entity that we're trying to get in the bed with. So, like, for me, getting into how much we're charging for it. I mean, there's some excellent information out there about how inexpensive this deal is and how expensive power is. Right now, Quebec, most people, Doug May just put out an excellent series of videos, a little technical, but the gist of it is that Quebec right now is actually buying power from the United States at times because their main hydro-producing reservoirs are suffering a drought, and they have since 2023, meaning that Quebec isn't able to produce as much power as they previously had. So this again makes our bargaining position stronger, overlaid on top of the fact that we've got we've got this new nation-building mantra and all that stuff. So anyway, I'll let you comment. I know there's a lot there.
Yeah, there is, and unfortunately it's 11:45 and 21 seconds here, and I've got a few callers in the queue, so I'll give you just a couple of seconds to wrap it up, Tom, before we have to go.
What I want to say is that John Hogan and the Liberals have made a decision to make this election about the MOU. Every person who votes, regardless on their political stripe, really needs to sit with the things that people like, Des Sullivan and Dave Vardy and Danny Williams, and you can go across the full political spectrum and really realize that is the defining factor. When you check your ballot, that is what every Newfoundlander needs to realize. That is what this election is about. And don't let yourself get sucked into these promises of money we do not have to spend. That's going to be more debt and deficit on your children and grandchildren. That is a decision people should make when they're at the ballot box. Anyway, I appreciate it. Everybody take care and get out and vote.
Thanks, Tom. All the best.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Tom Davis seeking re-election Ward 4. Final break in the morning. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Say good morning to the Executive Director at Grace Sparks House. That's Lisa Slaney. Lisa, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty.
Welcome back to the program. So you and I have had many conversations about demand for emergency shelter for women at the Grace Sparks House and otherwise. But now we get into this operational funding and how it's not keeping up with renegotiated wages. Talk us through this.
Yeah, so we are the shelters. Each shelter is an incorporated body, separate from government. Direct contact, I'll best put it that way, and we receive our core funding, of course, from government. So in that regard, the majority of our shelters in the province are unionized, and we don't have any control over what's negotiated. Government does that. So I guess after, so many years, and since 2020, I think we've gone through 5 different ministers within Newfoundland and Labrador Housing where our money is funneled through from government, our core funding. And we have no say, we have no control over what benefits are given, but our budgets have never been adjusted to reflect what's been negotiated. And I guess, after again, 5 ministers and trying to get that message through that, we felt the need to move forward because, I can speak for our shelter. I mean, our last fiscal year, we were unable to make payroll twice. And, people donate to the shelters for the women and children. They don't donate to pay, negotiated salaries by the government. So, I guess again, for 5 different ministers not really understanding what we're saying or the crisis that we're in, that we decided, that we're going to have to bring this to a larger audience to get more attention because it. So that's where we are. There's other shelters, of course, that are unable to make payroll or to pay light bills or whatever it may be. We all have different challenges. So, government can't look at us as just one entity. We have to be, individually looked at in terms of what our funding requirements are. And of course, that has to be include, the negotiated salaries and benefits that government does.
Yeah, I mean, not to oversimplify, but could it be as fundamental as, because you have no control inside the negotiations between the government and NAPE or CUPE or whoever's the representative union, would it just be as fundamental as whatever the increased operating expenses are based on wages and benefits, that the equal commensurate uptick in government funding just come part and parcel?
Yes, absolutely. And that needs to happen, but it hasn't been consistent. Like you have to kind of be at the 11th hour with no money before, things were passed forward to us. But again, we're just trying to get a larger audience to understand how important, our services are, how important they are to be fully funded. And, I hope whoever is elected to government next really sees the need that you need to sit down with each individual shelter, each board, and understand what their needs are, because the needs in Nain are not the same as what they are in St. John's, nor are they the same, in Marystown as they are in Corner Brook. We all have unique needs based on our services and, cost of living, all those different things. You don't have to be taught into it. And we can't take, what I call operational monies, which would be, your light bill, phone bill, snow clearing, all those kind of things, insurances. We can't use that money to go towards salaries, but that's basically what's been happening. So, again, I hope now that we've put it out there in a broader audience that, the women and children will get, the services that they deserve.
Dan Meads was on with Jerry Lynn Mackey, of course, a well-known advocate in this arena, and he said the basic question is for the different political parties, either increase the funding or close the beds. Pick one or the other. Is it as fundamental as that?
It is, absolutely. Yep. Because if you have to budget out for, your salaries, which if you don't have staff, you don't have a service. So if you have to budget out your salaries to ensure you have enough money to get to the end of March, well then, you're going to have to serve less people. So you're buying less groceries, you're having a smaller light bill, those kind of things.
It's unbelievable. I mean, for starters, the prevalence of domestic violence and the need for emergency shelters to the extent that we do in this province is where we should be focusing the conversation. There should be no need for, and I'm not going to say that you're doing this, but there should be no need for an operator or an employee at emergency shelter for women and children to have to grovel and put this in the media for government to understand the issue.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we've been heard, and we look forward to a positive response from whoever is elected. And
you don't need to react to this if you don't want to, but this issue is just so dire and prevalent and emotional and violent that at the exact same time, there's an interesting news story in the media today, and someone sent me a link from Amazon Canada, I don't know, a couple of days ago or one day last week, and it was about those tight-fitting sleeveless men's undershirts that was made famous by Brando in A Streetcar Named Desire, and people refer to him colloquially on the street as a wife beater, and Amazon has him tagged as exactly that. Talk about trivializing or downplaying the severity of domestic violence. Unbelievable. Did you see that story?
Wow. No, I didn't. Oh my God. Wow. That's crazy. Like this day and age, that's absolutely crazy.
Oh, absolutely.
And we talk about where the messages come from, and how it continues. Like I started this journey 25 years ago, just with Grace Sparks' house. And can I say that it's gotten better? Absolutely not. Like in 25 years. I mean, I can remember us starting, and it'll be 25 years Thanksgiving that we opened our doors, and I can remember our board saying to us at the time, you're really here to work yourself out of a job. And sadly, 25 years, we're still here.
I appreciate your time, Lisa. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Patty. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Final word goes to line 5. Joan, you're on the air.
Oh, excuse me. Hi, Patty. I'm just going to make it short. My husband lost his hearing aid at Mundy Pond when he went for a walk. Now, I know it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, but I'm just wondering if someone did pick it up, or maybe they did and didn't, they don't know who owns it. If they can call 709-739-0327. Now, it was lost between it's been lost between where the dog, they go and exercise their dog, so is in that area. So we went over with a metal detector, but we didn't find it. But it could have popped into the grass or somewhere when he was taking off his coat and lost the hearing aid. So anyway, it's a chance. I figured I'd call in anyway.
Well, fingers crossed. So if you're taking a walk in that area, put your eyes down to the ground every now and then, see if we can spot Joan's husband's hearing aid. And if you do find it, please give them a call at 709-739-0327.
Thank you so much, Patty.
Welcome.
You're a godsend to everybody.
Fingers crossed you get it back. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye. All right, Joan did indeed have the last word, but you know the deal. We will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning, right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.